Welcome to the deep dive. And for this one, you sent us this really, just a powerful and honestly heartbreaking stack of sources.
Yeah, they were tough to read.
They really were. It's
Yeah.
a collection built almost entirely from these raw, first-hand accounts.
From teachers, from educators, all working right now in 2025 across the U.S. public school system.
And the core truth we pulled from it all is, well, it's pretty simple. The career of teaching is fundamentally broken. It's just not the job they signed up for anymore. And the system is making people who love teaching miserable.
That sense of loss, that distress, it's just palpable in the writing. What these sources really get into is this unprecedented system failure. It's forcing educators into, acts of self-preservation.
Right.
So our mission today is to really unpack the forces fueling this. We're going to focus on three big themes.
Okay.
First, the teacher exodus. Second, the really drastic rise in student behavior issues. And finally, the alarming decline in basic cognitive and academic skills.
And just to give you a sense of the emotional toll right away.
Yeah.
Think about this detail.
Yeah.
One teacher posted, "I have 2 hours left of my school day, and I'm leaving because I am so stressed out I cannot function."
Wow.
They just packed up and walked out. Another one just sums it all up by saying, "I don't know that we can keep going like this."
That exhaustion, that feeling of powerlessness, that's what defines these sources.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Okay, so let's get into it with that first theme, the exodus.
We're seeing teachers quitting mid-year in record numbers. And the sources are so clear about this. It's not because they don't care about the students.
No, it's the opposite.
Exactly. They're leaving because they feel the system no longer lets them actually teach kids.
They call it self-preservation.
A vital act of self-preservation.
And when you look at what they feel they can't teach, it's not just, history dates or grammar.
Right.
The real loss is the ability to teach crucial life skills. Things like self-management, respect, accountability.
And instead, the directive from administration, and we're seeing this across different states, is basically to just keep things quiet.
Keep the peace.
Keep the peace and keep the bodies in the room. That's the job.
And what's really corrosive is this pressure to basically manipulate the data.
Yeah, we saw so many accounts of that. Teachers being told to adjust standards, sometimes to pass at 20% competency,
20%.
just to make sure the numbers look good and the kids get a diploma.
And that is such a profound disservice to the learner, because the teachers know they're pushing these kids into a world that will hold them accountable.
Right. The real world has standards.
Exactly. You're robbing them of the chance to learn accountability now when the stakes are low. You're setting them up for a massive failure later.
This feeling of doing a disservice is just magnified by this massive systemic constraint. One teacher called it the continental rift of the post-pandemic era.
And what's that?
The shift from autonomous teaching to a scripted curriculum.
Ah, yes.
Before, a teacher had a pacing guide, right?
Hmm.
An outline. But they use their professional judgment now. It's a literal script.
This is where the autonomy just vanishes.
Complete.
A scripted curriculum is, it's a textbook broken down minute by minute. It even tells them what transition phrases to use.
So the idea is standardization. An admin can walk into any room and know what's supposed to be happening.
That's the argument, yeah.
Yeah.
That everyone is, and this is a quote, on the same page, literally.
But doesn't that at least help, new teachers or someone struggling?
That's the line they use to enforce it. But what you hear from all the experienced teachers in these sources is that this script is a symptom of total distrust.
It strips away their professional judgment.
Completely. Think about it. If you're a teacher and you know half your class didn't get the concept on Tuesday,
You have to reteach it on Wednesday.
you're professionally obligated to. But the script says, nope, move on. You have all the responsibility for their success, but zero freedom to actually ensure it.
And then you couple that lack of respect with the financial reality. We all know teachers aren't paid a lot, but the sources really dig into the hidden costs. That salary is just spread over 12 months. People think they get summers off, but they only get paid for the time they are actively working in front of students.
Exactly. We are talking about insane amounts of unpaid labor.
Lesson planning, grading.
Attending mandatory training outside of their contract hours, constant parent communication. And then there's the money for supplies.
Oh yeah, teachers spending hundreds of their own dollars every year.
Just to keep the classroom stocked. So when you combine that financial strain with the psychological toll of being forced to follow a script that is harming kids,
It makes perfect sense why they see leaving as the only option. It really is self-preservation.
the whole system is just engineered for data output, not for learning input.
So what's the one thing, the overwhelming source of stress that makes the job physically impossible?
That takes us right into our second major theme, the catastrophic crisis in student behavior.
And the findings here are just staggering. Multiple sources said that 90% of a teacher's job now is managing behavior.
Not teaching content.
No. Teaching students how to regulate their emotions. They've become counselors, but they're still expected to hit all the academic targets.
And that job is made so much harder
Yeah.
by this culture of fear, a total loss of consequences.
We have a really jarring story about that.
Yeah, this one was shocking. A student was led into the wrong room by a paraprofessional. The teacher asked them to leave.
And the response.
The student just unloads on her, calls her a degrading name over and over, and then threatens physical violence.
My gosh. And what happened to the teacher?
She has a severe panic attack, crying through her whole lunch break. But here's the key detail. She was expected to go right back to class.
Why?
Because there's a massive substitute shortage. Meanwhile, the student sent home for the day. That's it.
And the pair who made the mistake in the first place.
No disciplinary action at all. And what really horrified the teacher was realizing the student had filmed part of it. The video was going around.
Wow.
And other kids admitted they were afraid to defend the teacher, not afraid of the administration, but afraid of that student.
When the authority structure collapses like that, I mean, what do you even do?
And this isn't just a high school problem. This collapse of social norms starts so young.
Incredibly early.
We have an account of a 6-year-old on a soccer field. He walks up to a grown parent on the sidelines and makes a specific, degrading sexual gesture.
That's 6-year-olds.
A 6-year-old, and his own parents are sitting just yards away, knee-deep in their phones, totally oblivious.
That parental disengagement is a theme that just comes up again and again. It's so frustrating for the teachers.
It creates situations where students have zero sense of care or appreciation. One teacher spent her own money on a plastic magic wand to make class fun.
Right, trying to add a little sparkle.
A child immediately breaks it, sees that the teacher is genuinely upset, and just laughs. That's not just mischief. That's a profound lack of empathy.
And we saw accounts of much more aggressive behavior, too.
Oh, much more extreme. Spitting in other kids' faces. A student physically grabbing an autistic child's arm and face.
And the parent response.
When the teacher called home, the parent just excused it by saying their child still believes in Santa Claus.
As if that's a reason for assault. It implies they can't connect actions and consequences at all.
It's a massive accountability gap. The parents don't answer the phone, the admin doesn't follow through.
And the conclusion from teachers is that the students are running the classroom and teachers have no authority.
And that consumes 90% of their day. So, you have to ask, what is this doing to their ability to actually learn anything?
If teachers are spending all their time just managing the room, it has to be leading to an academic crisis.
Which brings us to segment 3, the cognitive collapse.
The data here is, it's genuinely scary.
It is. An 8th grade history teacher shared their numbers. Out of about 110 students, only 2 are reading on grade level.
2 out of 110.
And get this, 18 are reading at a kindergarten level. 55, the majority of the class, are somewhere between 2nd and 4th grade levels.
So for you listening, that means an 8th grade teacher has to dumb down a lesson on, say, the American Revolution by 7 years for some kids. It's impossible.
It is. Teachers say students just lack basic thinking skills. They can't do inference. They can't process a question that's longer than one sentence.
And connecting cause and effect is a huge struggle.
Huge. Here's a perfect example. Kids are copying notes from the board. They physically write the sentence. Maryland was founded as a safe haven for Catholics.
Okay, simple fact.
Right after the teacher asks, where were the Catholics?
And they can't answer.
Many of them couldn't. They look at their notes where they just wrote the answer and they can't make the connection.
It's that quote that just sticks with you, that the information goes from the eyes to the hands and not pass through the brain at all.
That sums it up perfectly. And we see it in high school, too. A student doing extra credit literally copied the assignment instructions.
Oh, no.
Including the part that said, do not use this example, and turned it in thinking they'd done the work.
The physical act of typing has replaced the mental act of thinking.
And on top of that skills deficit, you have a total motivation meltdown. The apathy is profound.
Yeah, 10th graders complaining that reading a 3-paragraph passage is too much.
3 paragraphs. And they need constant stimulation. They'll ask to skip a movie tied to a lesson because they can't just sit and watch for 20 minutes. The stamina for mental effort is gone.
And it's not just the struggling students.
That's the fascinating part. Even the smartest students are showing this failure of self-motivation.
Hmm.
High-achieving kids are failing assignments because they can't make themselves do work unless an adult is literally standing over them, telling them to do something.
And that leads us right to the technology piece, which seems to be the engine driving all of this.
It's completely changed the conversation in the classroom. You have fourth and fifth graders asking, why do I need to know any of this if a computer or AI can do it for me?
They're questioning why they need to learn to read if a computer can read to them.
Or why they need to learn math when they can just take a picture of the problem and an app solves it.
So what's the long-term consequence of that?
It's dire. You're creating an entire generation that will be entirely helpless without the internet. They are outsourcing their brains.
Let's run through some of the basic skills that teachers say have just evaporated.
It's a staggering list. It's everything we used to assume was a prerequisite for just basic functioning.
Kids can't read an analog clock. Many third graders don't know their own address or their parents' phone numbers.
They can't count money. They don't know the names of coins or their values. And a shocking number still can't tie their own shoes.
Or follow multi-step directions.
And you see this critical thinking gap all the way up into AP classes. Students will do one Google search for a research paper, and if it fails, they just conclude, there's no articles on my topic.
They lack the resilience to just rephrase the question.
Exactly. Or a teacher will post detailed instructions, and a student will ask a question that is, quote, clearly and blatantly addressed in the instructions.
And when you tell them to read the directions,
They say, yeah, but you could just tell me, right?
that need for instant, frictionless information, it bypasses the entire point of learning how to learn.
It leads to what teachers are calling question fatigue, answering thousands of basic questions a day, like how to switch to suggesting mode in a Google Doc.
A perfect storm of apathy and tech dependency. Let's talk about the societal implications of this.
They're enormous, especially when you look at how student aspirations are changing.
Right. 10 years ago, kids wanted to go to college, be engineers. 5 years ago, doctors and nurses.
But today, the majority of high schoolers dream of instant wealth, winning the lottery for like $2.5 billion, or winning a new truck.
What's the takeaway there?
It's that they see the traditional path to success, hard work, discipline as broken or just not worth it. The only way to survive is to just get cash.
They've lost the ability to dream of doing something.
And all of this is putting a massive strain on the special education system.
How so?
Well, the evaluation lists are through the roof. The system is struggling because a lack of language exposure at home means a simple language delay can look like a true language impairment.
And what about the behavior issues?
Extreme behaviors are getting labeled as OHI, other health impairment, which covers things like ADHD or ODD. But often, these labels are being applied without a formal medical diagnosis just to get resources. It's blurring the lines of what SPEAID can actually solve.
It all comes back to that chilling observation from one teacher about society splitting.
It's such a powerful metaphor. Society is splitting between parents who are actively teaching and challenging their kids and those who aren't.
And because the schools are simultaneously moving everything downward,
Eliminating gifted classes, passing kids no matter what, the only place to find real excellence is increasingly outside the public system.
so if the system is standardizing failure, what's the ultimate outcome?
The sources warn that this path leads straight to the beginning of the movie Idiocracy, where adults lack critical thinking, they're easily manipulated, and they can't handle any challenge. The message is, it's okay that you can't read, we're just gonna push you along.
And the parents who see this happening.
They're leaving. They're homeschooling their kids to make sure they're actually prepared for a complex world.
So to sum this all up, the crisis for teachers is they have all the responsibility, but none of the autonomy. They're overwhelmed by behavior, they're remediating basic life skills, and the system just demands compliance and good data.
That's it exactly. And based on that huge shift in what kids are dreaming about, that belief that you just have to get cash instead of earning success, we want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
If a whole generation believes the only viable success is instant and unearned, how does society ever regain the ability to celebrate hard work, patience, and learning for its own sake? How do you instill that intrinsic value in a world that is completely optimized for instant gratification? That's the challenge for all of us. Look, if you just glance at the headlines right now, the signal is, it's pretty clear and urgent.
It is.
Teachers are quitting in record numbers. Schools say they're completely overwhelmed.
And parents are exhausted.
Right. And the behavioral challenges, the ones showing up in classrooms, they're just getting harder and harder to manage. It really feels like the whole system is at a breaking point.
It is a crisis, absolutely. And our mission, really, in this deep dive, is to move past the simple, easy answers.
The easy blame.
Exactly. We're here to analyze the influence of this highly immersive media. We're talking video games, certain types of music, and really dig into why the consequences always seem to be externalized.
Pushed onto someone else.
Pushed onto the education system, onto families, and eventually the justice system. All while the industry's making billions just sort of avoid accountability.
And we need to be really clear for you, the listener, right from the start. This is absolutely not about blaming children.
Not at all.
And it's not about that lazy argument, the straw man that, video games cause violence.
That's just simplistic. It's false.
We reject it. The reality we're diving into is, well, it's much more complex. It's about influence, conditioning, and this dangerous convergence of different factors.
That's the word, convergence.
Yeah.
We're looking at what happens when you have this repeated exposure, this conditioning,
Yeah.
and it interacts with a young person who maybe has poor impulse control.
Or a stressful home life.
Or a stressful home life, a lack of adult supervision, and this is the critical part, access to real-world weapons. That's the convergence that professionals are seeing the results of every single day.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away. If we're setting aside that simple cause and effect argument, what does the actual research, psychological, neurological research, what does it say is happening here?
Well, the consensus across decades of serious study is incredibly consistent. And we're talking about lab experiments, longitudinal studies that last for years, massive meta-analytic reviews.
So a huge body of evidence.
A huge body. And no serious researcher claims direct causation. But what they do show consistently is a powerful association, a link between repeated high-frequency exposure to violent games and specific cognitive and emotional changes.
And what are those specific changes? What keeps showing up in the data?
It's mainly four things. First, increased aggression in thought and in behavior. Second, a reduction in empathy, less responsiveness to the suffering of others.
Desensitization.
Exactly. Desensitization to violence, which normalizes it, and maybe the most important one, impaired impulse control.
The brain's braking system.
That's a perfect way to put it. The frontal lobe, the brain's brake system, is still developing into a person's mid-20s. If you are constantly training an immature brain to slam on the accelerator for an aggressive, consequence-free action, you are weakening its ability to use the brakes later on.
That distinction, influence versus causation, it reminds me of the critical quote for this whole discussion. Influence doesn't have to be absolute to be dangerous. We regulate other things in society, like alcohol or gambling, for this exact reason, don't we?
Right.
Because the risk compounds, even if it doesn't affect everyone the same way.
Precisely. That's the perfect analogy. Alcohol doesn't make every single person who drinks it violent.
Of course not.
And gambling doesn't ruin every person who places a bet. But we regulate them for minors because the risk gets exponentially higher when the exposure is early, unsupervised, and normalized. If we accept that for a substance, why do we just dismiss it for constant immersive media?
So if the research shows us the why, let's talk about the how. And that gets us into the engineering, which I find just fascinating. This isn't accidental.
Oh, not even close. Modern platforms are engineered specifically to maximize engagement because engagement equals profit. These aren't just games anymore. They are sophisticated psychological conditioning systems.
So break that down. What are these reward loops doing to a person's mind?
It all centers on dopamine reinforcement. The systems use these escalating mechanics. They're constantly demanding more time, more commitment, and they offer these unpredictable, high-value rewards.
So like a slot machine.
It's the exact psychological principle of a slot machine. Intermittent reinforcement that keeps you hooked way past the point of just having fun. You add competitive stress to that, the need to dominate, and then desensitization from doing it over and over. You've got a product designed to overwhelm the brain's natural off switch.
And this is where it gets really, I think, really concerning. Because kids don't consume this stuff in a vacuum, right? It interacts with everything else going on in their lives.
That's the perfect storm scenario we mentioned. You have the media exposure, and then you add, say, chronic stress at home, poor sleep, often because of late-night gaming.
A lack of supervision.
A critical lack of direct adult supervision. And then, on top of all that, you layer on easy access to real-world weapons. Suddenly, the risk isn't theoretical anymore. It's a public safety issue.
I want to share a specific case study from one of the sources. We're limiting the details, of course, for privacy. This came from an intake supervisor in Nassau County.
Okay.
A 15-year-old was taken into custody for an act of extreme violence against his grandmother. And the trigger, the thing that set it off, was her taking away a video game.
And again, it's so important to say, the game didn't cause the violence, not on its own.
Absolutely not. The conflict, the issues, they were already there. But it was the catalyst. It pushed an already fragile mind past its breaking point.
The response was disproportionate.
Hugely disproportionate.
Yeah.
And impulsive. But this is the detail that really stuck with the clinicians. In custody, the young person didn't show rage. He showed a chilling detachment, what they call emotional flattening.
The lack of a proportional emotional response? That's a huge red flag for conditioning.
Exactly. The language he used to describe what he did, it mirrored gameplay. He talked about hitting a reset button, and he framed these massive real-world consequences as if they were minimal, like he could just start the level over.
The brain was conditioned to see conflict as consequence-free, not real.
It suggests a really deep functional conditioning had happened, and it completely superseded his ability to feel real remorse.
And this right here, this is what connects back to the systemic costs. This is what our schools are absorbing. Teachers are expected to manage the fallout from this exact convergence.
All day, every day.
The chronic impulsivity, the emotional dysregulation, the aggression, the defiance, the shortened attention spans. This is the fallout from systems that put profit way ahead of neurological health.
The imbalance is just, it's stark, isn't it? Entertainment industries make billions from engagement. Parents are marketed convenience, the screen as a babysitter.
Teachers.
And teachers, the lowest paid people in this chain, are told to just manage the volatility. With no resources, it's no wonder they're quitting.
Which brings us to the core systemic problem, cost externalization. Like industrial pollution. A factory privatizes the profit. The money goes to the shareholders. But the consequences, the pollution in the river, that's socialized. We, the taxpayers, pay to clean it up. It's the same here. The behavioral fallout is socialized.
So when we rely on the justice system, it's already a sign of failure.
Precisely. The justice system is the most expensive last-ditch stop after we've had failures at every other point. Failure of family limits, corporate responsibility, cultural boundaries. We are literally paying, with tax dollars, for the consequences of corporate engineering.
So what does prevention look like? I mean, are other countries handling this differently?
Some are, yes. They acknowledge that a developing brain is vulnerable and needs limits. You look at, say, China or South Korea. They have policies that restrict gaming time for minors, or they enforce much stronger parental oversight.
And the goal there isn't control?
No, the goal is protection. It's not oppression. In our culture, we seem to confuse freedom with neglect. We treat any boundary as authoritarian right up until a crisis forces our hand.
Now, to be fair here, we can't make this just about video games. That would be dishonest. This kind of conditioning comes from other places, too.
That's absolutely correct. We have to talk about the influence that comes through certain strains of music.
Yeah.
Specifically, highly aggressive forms of gangster rap and violent hip-hop that are marketed very aggressively to young people.
Where criminality is the brand.
It's the brand. Dominance, dehumanization, retaliation. It's all glorified and woven into identity.
And we have to be crystal clear for you, the listener. This is not a condemnation of the hip-hop genre.
Not at all.
Historically, it has been an incredibly powerful voice for social critique, for resistance. We're focused here strictly on the commercial content where violence becomes aspirational, where being numb is sold as being strong.
And the research backs this up. The psychological mechanism is a little different than with games, though. Games condition motor responses, action. Music shapes narrative identity.
So it's about the story you tell yourself.
Exactly. Studies show that repeated exposure to music glorifying this behavior can increase aggressive thoughts and normalize hostility. It helps an adolescent who's looking for an identity to build one around dominance and retaliation.
That's a really important distinction. Identity through narrative versus desensitization through action.
It is. And when the lyrics are telling you violence is the only way to get respect, and the online algorithms are rewarding the most extreme content, it's a powerful feedback loop.
And the record labels profit from the controversy.
Of course. And the cost, once again, gets passed on to society.
So it's this compound effect. The violent gameplay, the violent lyrics, the violent online clips, they're all reinforcing the exact same message.
Power through force. Respect through fear.
And consequences are for the weak. It all gets cemented into a worldview, marketed as expression.
So what does this all mean? I think it brings us back to the core theme here. Adult responsibility.
And what that actually looks like.
Right. And responsibility isn't about control. It's about presence. It's about supervision. And it's about setting mature, defensible limits. We cannot keep confusing a child's freedom to consume with our neglect of the boundaries they need to develop.
Which brings it all full circle, back to our schools. Teachers are leaving because they are being asked to compensate for this systemic avoidance. They're trying to fix damage that was engineered for profit long before a kid ever walked into their classroom.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. If we acknowledge that influence is real, demonstrably real, and if we know that prevention only works before the damage is done, what is the true long-term price our society is paying by choosing to treat boundaries as hysteria and waiting for a crisis before we finally acknowledge responsibility? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking a stack of sources that tell a very tough, a very uncomfortable story.
It's a really difficult one.
Yeah, it's about why teachers are quitting, why our schools feel so overwhelmed, and how this crisis in youth behavior really starts long before a kid ever steps into a classroom.
We have a powerful, almost, I'd say devastating set of notes for this deep dive. The material comes from someone who saw this crisis from two completely different angles.
Two different angles.
Yeah, first in childcare and then later as a detention deputy. They literally watched the trajectory. They saw how some young lives start in one institution and then end up in the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
That gives us a rare, unflinching view, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So our mission today, it's not to cast blame.
No, not at all.
Or to, get into some kind of moral panic. It's to look at the verifiable influence of modern media, to ask where accountability has gone and what systemic failures have led us here.
Exactly. This isn't theoretical. The core idea that comes out of these notes is it's pretty brutal.
What is it?
It's that we essentially legalized mass addiction. We outsourced parenting and moral development to screens. And now the entire public infrastructure, the teachers, the courts, all of it, is absorbing the predictable consequences.
It's the ultimate example of the public sector cleaning up a private sector mess.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We should start with the evidence of influence, because that's where the conversation always seems to get bogged down.
That's the vital first step. We have to be really clear about the difference between, say, single cause blame and a documented, consistent influence.
Okay.
Our source material is very careful here. It points out that research, generally finds no clear evidence that violent games directly cause real-world criminal violence, like, say, a school shooting on their own.
But that's the line that always gets used, right? The no direct cause finding. It feels like it lets companies and even parents completely off the hook. It's the perfect shield.
It is a perfect shield.
A great one.
So how do we shift the conversation?
Yeah.
How do we move away from that blanket statement and toward understanding how this influence actually works?
Well, we have to focus on what the research does consistently show. And it's very clear. Reviews by major psychological associations, they all confirm a reliable link between prolonged exposure to violent media, especially games, and measurable increases in aggressive thoughts.
Aggressive thoughts, okay.
Aggressive thoughts, aggressive feelings, and aggressive behaviors. And critically, this exposure is also linked to desensitization and reduced empathy.
Okay, that's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if the documented link is often described as, small to moderate, why should we treat it like a crisis? Why does that small influence matter so much?
Because influence doesn't have to be absolute to be dangerous. That small to moderate effect, it compounds over an entire childhood. Think about regulated substances, alcohol, tobacco, gambling. We don't regulate them because they ruin every single person who uses them. We regulate them because for a vulnerable percentage of people, the risk is real, the exposure is addictive, and the collective cost to society is immense.
And the comparison to addiction is really the key here. These aren't just toys. They are meticulously engineered psychological systems.
Precisely. They're designed for maximum engagement. They use intermittent reinforcement, progression loops, dopamine spikes.
All the tricks of the trade.
Every single one. And when a child engages with a system engineered for that kind of rapid, constant reward, the system is actively training their impulse reflex, its training reaction before their prefrontal cortex, the seat of conscience and long-term planning, is fully developed.
So you're literally conditioning them. You're teaching them to prioritize that immediate digital reward over any kind of real-world consequence.
You are. And that neurological conditioning, That's what shows up in the classroom, right? The teacher is suddenly dealing with kids whose entire operating system is set to instant gratification and low tolerance for friction.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. The classroom can't compete.
Absolutely. The classroom becomes this place of constant conflict because the child has been conditioned to expect a level of stimulation and immediate resolution that, well, reality just can't provide. And this influence, it isn't just visual. The source material really pushes us to look beyond the screen.
To other media that reinforce the same things.
Exactly. The notes specifically call out certain strains of music that, just like the video games, reinforce a hostile worldview.
Now, we have to be impartial here.
We must be. This is not about condemning an entire genre of music. Often that genre is a powerful voice for resistance, for social critique, for telling the truth about reality. The critique here is purely thematic.
Okay, so what is the theme?
It's content that consistently glorifies domination, dehumanization, retaliation. And it packages emotional numbness, this refusal to process complex feelings as a form of strength. The only way to get respect.
So if I'm summarizing this for you, the listener, the source is saying that expression is a protected right. But when that content, whether it's violent lyrics or violent gameplay, when it reinforces the same message over and over again.
Power through force.
Yeah, power through force. What happens then?
You get a dangerous reinforcement loop. The message just compounds. The digital world validates the identity being formed in the music, and the music validates what's happening in the game. That's how our source sees this hostile identity formation emerging in kids who are already struggling to find power and belonging.
The takeaway here feels pretty stark. Expression is a right, absolutely. But exposure without context, without limits, without any adult guidance, a situation where an algorithm becomes the main moral teacher that crosses a line.
It crosses the line into abandonment. That's the critical pivot. And it's why we have to anchor this abstract research in reality. It's one thing to talk about correlations and aggression, but the source material brings this all home with a deeply chilling first-hand account. It anchors all the data in real, lived consequence.
Let's talk about that. Tell us about the case from Nassau County, the one the deputy details in the notes.
Okay, so this involved a 15-year-old boy. He was brought into custody after a horrific crime. He had shot a family member, his own grandmother, with a 12-gauge shotgun.
My God. And what was the trigger?
The precipitating conflict, the thing that tipped the scale into that catastrophic violence.
Right.
It was so simple she had taken his video game away.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
It just forces you to confront the reality that the stakes are so incredibly high when we talk about this digital dependency.
And what the source material really emphasizes is that this wasn't just some freak event. It was the culmination of multiple failures. The deputy saw it as a perfect storm.
A perfect storm of what factors?
Well, you had poor impulse control to start. Combine that with constant exposure to simulated consequence-free violence. Then you add real-world access to lethal weapons. And it all collided during a real-world conflict over the object of his addiction.
That collision point, the fight over the game, that's where the line between the digital reality and physical consequence it completely dissolved.
It did, and you could see that dissolution in the immediate aftermath. The notes focus on this chilling observation that the language the 15-year-old used to describe what he did, it mirrored the language of gameplay.
What do you mean? Like what terms?
Terms like reset, this sort of consequence-free framing, and a level of detached emotional flattening that was just deeply disturbing. The deputy saw a child operating on conditioned reflexes, not human empathy or moral thought.
A complete and total disconnect. He was describing a real murder using the vocabulary of a virtual death where you just reload and start over.
Precisely. That level of detachment is the terrifying result of that kind of conditioning without any supervision. The core lesson the source pulls from this is that the whole situation felt entirely unattended. And it was preceded by warning signs that were ignored, that escalated. The system only showed up at the very end.
For the most expensive cleanup imaginable.
Exactly.
And when those signs are ignored, the cost is just. It's immediately externalized, pushed onto the public. Which brings us right to the system failure. Why are we in this position? Why do we allow products engineered for addiction to be deployed on kids with zero liability?
This is where we define that uncomfortable truth. The system failure and cost externalization pipeline. These games stay largely unregulated in the U.S. for three main reasons.
Okay, what are they?
First, they're very strongly protected as speech under the First Amendment. That makes direct content censorship nearly impossible. Second, the rating system, the ESRB, it's voluntary. It's not law.
And the third reason is the silent killer, isn't it? the one that really makes this a business model.
The third reason is that corporations face zero, and I mean zero, liability for the behavioral fallout. Just compare that to the massive litigation and regulation we eventually imposed on tobacco companies.
So the games are legal, they're protected, and they're completely untouchable by the very systems that have to absorb all the damages.
Exactly.
So if I'm a listener, what does cost externalization really mean here? It sounds like you're saying the public is just paying for private profit.
That is exactly what it means. The profits are entirely private. Publishers profit from engagement. Platform holders profit from convenience, often sold to overwhelmed parents. Shareholders profit from reliable revenue.
But the consequences, who pays for the poor impulse control, the violence, the lack of empathy, the juvenile justice involvement?
The consequences are entirely public. The first responders are the schools and the teachers. Then it's the public mental health system, the courts, the detention facilities, and eventually the prisons. The private company earns the profit, the public pays for the repair.
This just perfectly explains why teachers are quitting in droves, which was the hook for this whole deep dive. They're not just teaching anymore.
Not at all.
They're being asked to be behavioral regulators, trauma managers, addiction referees, surrogate parents, and now, on top of all that, physical safety risk bearers.
They're managing the real-world behavioral consequences of a product that was designed for profit to circumvent impulse control. They are compensating for systemic avoidance, they're carrying burdens that were never meant to be theirs alone, and they're doing it with almost no resources or support.
And to put that in perspective, the source material draws a really interesting cross-cultural comparison. It asks why countries like Japan or China or Russia, where the same games are available, don't seem to have the same depth of behavioral crisis.
And the difference isn't the technology itself, it's the boundary.
There's boundaries.
Yeah. In those countries, you see strong social discipline, or in some cases, strict, enforceable government time limits for minors. They prioritize the societal structure over the individual's right to unlimited access.
So the key variable in the U.S. isn't the games alone. It's the environment they're being deployed into.
Precisely. The source material defines the American crisis as this formula: games plus weak boundaries plus a permissive culture plus parental abdication. We are uniquely unwilling to say no.
To both the kids and the corporations marketing to them.
Exactly. And this passive acceptance of dependency is what leads to the final, much broader observation our source makes.
Right. We started this talking about outsourced parenting. But the deputy's notes then shift to something much bigger. A structural pattern of elimination that sees dependency as the central goal.
This is the connective tissue. It links media influence to a much larger structural philosophy. If we're willing to outsource something as complex and human as moral development to a screen, what other critical human functions are being eliminated? All under the guise of efficiency.
And that's where this chilling list comes in, the pattern of elimination. It ties directly back to that lack of critical thinking we've been talking about.
The list details all these roles and concepts being slowly phased out. It starts with the immediate. No teachers means no critical thinking, no moral synthesis, no cashiers, no human exchange, no drivers, no movement without centralized permission, no doctors, no second opinions.
And it just expands from there, right,
Yeah.
into the very foundations of civic life.
No cash means no private transaction. Every single purchase is trackable. No civil rights means no individual leverage against the machine. No privacy means no inner life. No unmonitored thought.
It just keeps going. I mean,
Yeah.
the list continues. No journalists means no truth without an official filter. No librarians means no access to uncensored history.
No dissent means no mechanism for correction. No ownership means no stake in the future.
So when you look at that entire trajectory,
Yeah.
this relentless removal of friction, of human judgment, of individual discretion, what is the ultimate consequence?
The conclusion is stark. The ultimate consequence of all this centralization isn't just efficiency, even though that's the sales pitch. When every human role that requires judgment or independent action is replaced or eliminated, what's left isn't efficiency. It's absolute centralized control.
That brings a cold sense of purpose to everything we've discussed. Okay, let's revisit our mission one last time before we wrap up.
Right. This deep dive was about responsibility, not just blame. We've established the influence is real. The cost is externalized onto public systems. And this failure to set boundaries, it fits into a larger, observable pattern.
The core takeaway for you, the listener, is clear. Until adults realign responsibility with influence, the cost, both financial and human will, continue to be paid by children, by educators, and by families. Responsibility means presence, it means limits, it means refusing to outsource moral development to an algorithm.
Prevention requires regulation, not just of content, but of access and boundaries and engagement. We have to be willing to be the friction that the system is so desperately trying to eliminate.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought drawn directly from this chilling observation of a systemic pattern. When systems are engineered to eliminate friction, to eliminate risk, and to eliminate silence, what exactly is the cost to humanity? And what freedom is left for us to lose?